be on emerging trends in internet usage in India. This talk will be taken by Mr. Veer Kamal Chopra and Ms. Nandini. Veer Kamal Chopra, sir, is here. He is currently the Senior General Manager QA with BSNL at New Delhi. He started his career in teaching. He has played a vital role in providing telecommunication facilities and shaping BSNL, and is also responsible for finalization of high-value products which are purchased at the central level of BSNL. He is credited with introducing e-tendering for the first time at BSNL. Now I hand over to Mr. Chopra.
Yeah, good evening. I think we are in the last leg of our day's session today, so I'll not try to bore you, try to make the things as interesting as possible. In the morning, in the first lecture of Ms. Bernadette, there was a slide shown that in the olden time, the telecom used to have intervention of an operator, and we used to demand a call from our operator, and operator used to connect us. I just want to digress a little bit from my topic, just to tell you an interesting incident about that. That innovation has always been the hallmark of telecommunication. There was a lot of good instances when the people who are not engineers, who are not even connected with the field, they try to contribute a lot. So similarly, when that particular thing, when you used to have, telephone exchanges with the human operator, a very interesting thing happened in America. There's one guy known as Mr. Stauger. He was a carpenter, and he used to make casks for the human bodies. The human bodies which are being taken to the cemetery and all, graveyard and all. So one of his competitor was also in the business, and his wife was working as an operator in a telephone exchange. So in America there was a gun culture. Sooner or later there used to be incidents of shooting, and people used to fall, and there was a need of cars for them. So his wife used to listen to the rumors what is happening in the city area, and whenever any incident was to take place, before Mr. Stauger could reach over there, his competitor should always used to reach over there and get the business. So this fellow, he felt very much annoyed that look, I am also doing the business and he is also in the same business, and he is taking the opportunity from me. So that particular fellow, being a carpenter, he said that I will make something which will bypass the operator. And from there, a Stauger exchange came. And when Stauger exchange came, from there, then little bit controlled exchange, Pentaconta kind of exchanges came. And then after intervention of, invention of computers started getting married with communication, and now you can just imagine, there's no looking back. So this is, please.
When he announced the Stauger exchange, he said, womanless exchange.
Womanless exchange, yeah. So this is the kind of, innovations, they have always been going on in this particular field. Morning when she explained about RFCs, reference for comments and all. So it is that line of thing which is continuing still today, that people are doing something in some way, and when that thing become popular, that becomes a kind of standard in the telecom or internet. So I think that trend is still continuing. Anyway, so now this topic of emerging trend in internet, I have been given this topic little late. Previously I was to speak something on a technical subject, like wireless mobile, 1G, 2G, 3G or 4G, something like that. And then later on I was asked to come to this topic, and I have been able to prepare it for you. So this will be my agenda. That history of internet has already been covered. So this is nothing much except a mention of few sentences of that. Then what is the present status of internet in India? And then what is the condition of broadband and internet penetration in different states in our country. So this is a kind of statistical information on that. And then we are having access to internet through various technologies. There is a wireless technology, wireline technology, DSL, ADSL, and FTTH and FTTC, etc. That is the optical fiber technologies. So, little bit of impediments of growth. Review the emerging trends of internet in India. So, it is worthwhile to mention, as Mr. Pranesh has told, that in 1995, Videsh Sanchar Nigam was given a task of setting up internet in metro cities and some other cities. But in 98, DOT and VSNL, they were bifurcated. VSNL was providing in all metros and other 42 cities. Department of Telecom has set up its own nodes for the internet. So that was the, I think, first generation internet, so which was set up. On 6 November 98, there was a very landmark legislation was brought by DOT that is known as ISP policy. So in this, they permitted players with the internet license without any fee. They said there won't be any fee for 5 years, and after 5 years, they charged only 1 rupee for if you want to be an ISP licensee. So that was really a landmark thing, and after that, private operators, private ISP operators like SIFI and many others, they started operating in India. So in this particular thing, the license was issued immediately on the receipt of application without any number of people can apply, and everybody was given an ISP license, because the government was thinking that ISPs themselves, competition themselves will limit the number of ISPs. And this license was, no license fee was there for 5 years, and ISPs was categorized as A category, B category and C category, depending upon the territory in which they are operating. So this was really a good beginning for internet in India, and after that private operators started coming into this field. At present, if you see, we have got more than 900 million mobiles in our country. And out of this, 430 million mobile connections are such that in which they are capable of accessing internet. Because companies like BSNL, we have given access anybody who is having a 2G connection. So it is made by default as 3G. We are not charging anything on that, so they can access internet. Internet access is through GPRS, through Edge. So inherently, any mobile connection is there, it is having an access to internet. So accordingly, 430 million connections are coming out to be with internet, but net users in our country are around 120 million, as it was told in the previous slides also. And this broadband connections, what we called as a broadband, as Pranesh told, that always on and more than 256 kbps is the speed. Now it has been made as 512. It has been, I think, 2011 it made revised. So at present we have got total 15 million broadband connections in our country. And out of that, around 10 million mobile connections are belonging to BSNL. So around 60.35% connections, broadband connections which are working in the country. Penetration is very low, and compared to what it should be and what the government project to be, it is very low. So there is a rate of growth of internet around 30% in India. So this is the various states, how they are faring. If you see in this, Maharashtra is leading as far as internet penetration is there. Tamil Nadu is second one, Andhra Pradesh is third one, and Karnataka the fourth one. So it has got, less than 256 kbps, more than 256 kbps, and total connections are there. So this is how it is just a layman way of making a difference, that what are the things you could have done in 2000, what are the things you may be doing earlier, and what you will be doing after 2010 or 15. So for example, imagine a scene in 2000, a common man wants to buy a railway ticket, he has to go to the railway station. So he has to practically stand in line in the queue and get his ticket. This is prior to internet penetrating in our life. And later on, if you want to know the results of your exams, you have to go to the school or college and practically look into the result sheet. If we want to make a passport, invariably we have to go to the state capital or a national capital, and we have to go to the passport office to inquire about whatever the passport status is there. Similarly, if we want to know, if a farmer wants to know the price of the produce in the market, he has to go practically to the mandi. He doesn't have any other means through which he can get to know about the price of his produce. So there are many scenarios similarly. At that time, a lot of difficulty used to be there, and accordingly, the people were having difficulty without internet. So in the year 2010, you can do most of your tasks through email or SMS or through your mobile. For banking, you can go to the ATM and get your things done. For shopping, you can go for credit or a debit card. If you are traveling through the journey, you can get to know where you are and how you are, whether you are safe or not. So this has been a leap forward in the lifestyle of the people, and it is possible only through internet. Then the year coming, what will be the scenario? Whatever you could do in 2010, in addition to that, you can get in touch with your bank, transfer your money through mobile. While moving, you can do all these things. You can remain in touch in your office while traveling, book your further travel plans, or whatever you can imagine you can do. While traveling, you can consult your doctor, watch TV, your famous program through your mobile. So it is possible through your triple play, that on your mobile you can have video, or you can have data access, and you can do all these things. So little bit if we go further, what will happen in a scenario 2017? In addition to the task which you have been doing in 2015, you will be having now sensors implanted in the mobiles that will keep a watch in the real time on the health of the person, and it will send alert to the nearest medical facility in case of any sudden problem. So that kind of thing will be there. Your passport and visa would be in mobile, biometric data stored there. It would identify you anywhere in the whole world. There is no need of practically carrying your visa or your passport. Like Britannica, they have encyclopedia. They are taken a decision to stop it, printing and all. Only internet version will be available. So all these trends will be useful to the urban users as well as to the villagers equally. So this is how your mobile technology and internet technology, they will be making a difference to the rural people, to the villagers. So now let's talk about what are the technologies available at present, which is prevalent in India for internet access. So one is your digital subscriber line. One is your ADSL. ADSL can have speed of 1 Mbps in the upstream and 8 Mbps in the downstream. Then there is a splitter free ADSL, G-Lite it is called. Then we have symmetrical DSL, which will be having a equal data rate on the upstream as well as in the downstream. All these technologies which are having a wireline connections, they have got a limitation of a distance. From a DSLAM which is installed in the exchange, you have to have a distance of approximately 3 to 4 kilometer. If your distance increases, your data rate will be compromised. Similarly, ADSL 2 and 2 plus, which is very much nowadays used because BSNL is using only ADSL 2 plus modems, and that will be having a distance limitation of 2.5 kilometers, and you can have differential data rates, that is 8 Mbps in the upstream and 24 Mbps up to in the downstream. And then you have got a further VDSL, again, you know, it is not that much popular as ADSL2 and ADSL2 plus is there. In the wireless technologies, you have got a GSM, this is a normal plain, you know, voice telephone on mobile. We have got a general packet radio system which can give you a speed of 144 kbps. So this kind of thing, GPR is very famous and very popular. At least in BSNL in remote areas, I have seen people doing business with the internet using GPRS. They'll be having a small cable on a mobile and that they will be connecting it to laptop and all. Especially I was surprised when I saw in Srinagar, one boat fellow is there in the Dal Lake, and he's, you know, while taking the customers, he's using this GPRS phone and doing all his business, booking and then, you know, availability and everything like that. Huh? GPRS, yes. Actually, we people, you know, being in the department, we have got access to all kind of data rates at our disposal. We never used to look into this GPRS kind of thing. But when I went to Dal Lake and there I saw a man doing like that, I called him, okay, how do you do that? He says, it's very simple. He showed me his mobile and a small cable and a laptop. He says, look, I am taking care of all my customers from here. So I really found very, you know, I was amused. Similarly, you got a edge, prior to going to 3G, these are the steps, GPRS, edge and 3G. And with the department of BSNL, we have got 2 to 14.4 Mbps dongles are available in 3G. This particular technology 3G was, you know, very promising when it was launched. Everybody quoted for licenses. We in the department also, you know, paid very heavily for the licenses. And we lost about, you know, at present I should say we have lost around 18,000 crore rupees in that. So, but finally when thing went to the ground, it is not giving that much the expected, you know, results as it used to be. Because whenever 3G nodes are there and 2G nodes are there, when you are moving in a mobile, there is a kind of, you know, switching over taking place all the time between 2G and 3G. And that particular thing is not that harmonious. You do not get the seamless kind of data rate of 3G because in between carpet coverage is not that much, first thing. Second thing is, in between you keep on switching back to 2G rates and all. So user experience is not their good experience. But out of this, the government has been able to make a lot of money. Because of 3G licenses, the government has been able to rake in approximately 1,06,000 crore rupees. That is around $20 billion. The government has been able to make out of the auction of 3G airwaves. Now 4G is coming, Reliance is coming in a big way in 4G technology, and that is also called as broadband wireless access, BWA. So they are coming in a big way. So next technology is going to be LTE, that is known as long-term evolution, in which you can have a data rate more than 8 Mbps. Then we have got a WiMAX technology. WiMAX also, BSNL went into that in a limited way. Now we are doing this in the rural areas. This stands for Wireless Interoperability Microwave Access, WiMAX. So this is also more or less, people are not there to give you a payment for the data rates of 7 to 8 Mbps. So those kind of scenarios there because it is not that economical. And secondly, airwaves have been very expensive. Then we have got a CDMA. As you know, Reliance is the main player in that CDMA, and another is Tata, Tata Indicom. So they have been the two players which have been working in this, and now Sham Systema has also into this player, and they are also into this data rates. Then we have got 802.11, that is your Wi-Fi WLAN. I think this is very promising, and this particular technology will be more of a useful to the rural areas because you need not to pay for the spectrum in this particular case. And then we have got VSET data services. You can have a remote and rural areas, ATM application and all, up to 2 Mbps speeds you can have. Then further, what are the new trends in technology? BSNL is going in a big way fiber to the home. But in fiber to the home, the main problem is ROW, right of way. That all these governments, state governments, and whosoever administrations are there, they are very reluctant to give permissions to dig up the roads. But this technology is really very promising, and you can get a data rate of 100 Mbps from your home. You can have voice, you can video, you can have very big data rates. And these are the two technologies, fiber to the home, fiber to the curb, and metro ethernet, that is again a fiber based. And then very interesting is gigabit passive optical network. This GPON technology, we are into it, and it is very simple because you will be having a centralized facility, and then you will be having a NTC at the subscriber premises, and right through this subscriber home you can lay fiber, and then you can get data rates up to 100 Mbps. So this is the going to be future technology, and NOFUN, that is broadband BBNL, which government is now coming up with, that will be depending on this. They will be installing this gigabit passive optical network in the rural areas. So there is no limitation of distance in this particular thing, as in ADSL 2 and 2 plus you have seen, there is a limitation of distance. Here there is no limitation of distance. You can easily go more than 20 kilometers. So now here comes that I think it is getting further and further. So what are the impediments basically for internet to grow in the society? If you see in India the literacy rates, that is really one of the very low literacy rates, especially for the women in the rural areas. If literacy is less, then how we are going to provide internet to them? So first thing is right of education should be implemented so that they become more literate, and accordingly they can have access to internet. So this is one of the very big impediment for the rural women. So then again, access to the services. Access will be, affordability, quality of service, and access will be, it depend upon which community they belong to. As Mr. Rao he mentioned about the caste system in India, that is also one of the impediment. A lower caste will not be having access to it. The higher caste community, they will be having access because affordability is also cost based. Sometime if you see the statistical higher caste, they are having more affordable access compared to the lower caste. Lack of computer literacy. Computer literacy is very interesting. If we talk about, if I am a grown up person and later on I want to pick up suppose computer, I'll be taking more than 10 to 20 time efforts to pick up any facility in the computer. But if there is a small teenager, small child, thing like that, they can easily pick up. So that is again, computer literacy is very important if we want to bring internet to the remote and rural areas. Language barrier for the content, as rightly in the morning they pointed out that English is going to be a biggest barrier for the people, because everybody is not a English trained. Their local vernacular content should be available. So if it is not available, that is going to be an impediment for that. So again, these are the things you know better than me, but since I have come before you, I should say that these are the main areas where internet will be more helpful. That is teleeducation. There are many programs nowadays like NPTEL you told. Similarly, EDX is there. Similarly, one Khan Academy is there. Similarly, Gyan Doot is there in Madhya Pradesh. So those kind of things are there which can bring teleeducation. And I have seen in Delhi, there was a small congregation in some place. And I said, what for you people are assembled here? He says today is a seminar for teleeducation, because we are subscribed to some courses which are on the internet, and we have come for a face-to-face interaction for that. I think it is becoming very popular nowadays. So then we have got a e-governance. Every state has taken up this project of e-governance. E-governance will be implemented, on a infrastructure which will be available on the to the rural areas like panchayats or block headquarter. If optical fiber is available, then everybody will be able to implement the e-governance projects. Mobile banking, it's going to be very interesting. I think some private operators in India, they have launched already Airtel Money, something like that. So that is mobile banking. Telemedicine, entertainment, and there are many bouquet of services which I think USO fund is taking up some program in which SMS is given to the people regarding sowing conditions, seed conditions, fertilizers, what time they should use the pesticides, what quality of pesticides they should use it. Then forecasting of weather, marketing conditions, supply chains. So these are another areas which can be helpful to the people who are in the remote and rural areas. The villages will improve the extent of internet, then global economy shall be at the door of villages and operate like a service BPO. Employment generation will be there, because VLE kind of people with their village level entrepreneur will be there. They'll be giving them, services, and in turn they will be taking some commission. So that way there will be employment to the women as well. So this shall enable opportunities to rural entrepreneurs for these services, thereby employment opportunity for the rural people, especially women will be there. So this is, I talked about that many sites are like NPTEL, EDX, then there are many other foreign universities, they are having their sites for teleeducation. So this will be helpful, without going to school, without laying infrastructure of our schools, we can have teleeducation. Before this definition of e-governance, I would like to, tell this. In e-governance, there is a communication between various government. This is communication between government to citizen, that is called G2C. Between central government to government, that is G2G. There is a local government, within that again it is G2G, then between central government and local government there will be communication required, and then between government to business, NGOs, civil society. So all these platforms will be taken care by e-governance. So if we come to the definition, e-governance is the application of information and communication technologies to transform the efficiency, effectiveness, transparency, accountability of informational and transactional exchanges with the government, between government and government agencies of national, state, municipal, local level, citizens and businesses, and to empower citizens through access and use of information. So I think a lot of government, state governments, they have come up with this plan of e-governance, but practically it has not taken the shape with which the government thought of previously. So this is another area which is a lot of people are doing in their isolated pockets. The work is going on. Like Apollo Group has launched their own telemedicine project. Escorts Hospital have they have got own project. So similarly, Fortis Hospital they have got their own. So telemedicine is the most relevant to India as it faces scarcity of both hospitals and medical specialists. According to the Planning Commission, India is short of 600,000 doctors and 1 million nurses and 200,000 dental surgeons. So this is the ISRO telemedicine network they have established so far. They have got around 245 hospitals, 205 districts they are covering, and there are 40 super specialty hospitals like Apollo Chennai is there, similarly SSKM Calcutta is there. So I think in the remote areas some work is going on in this regard. So it is going to have a lot of impact in future. Another interesting thing will be mobile banking. So in this, Bharti has launched this Airtel Money program in which they have covered around 300 cities and they have got around 7,000 merchants on their panel. And in this, they can, an amount of Airtel wallet is there. You can instant money transfer from one Airtel Money wallet to another Airtel Money wallet can be there. And from your mobile account, you can deposit this money in your bank account also. So that is a kind of mobile banking. Similarly, in Kenya, there is a service like M-Pesa. So they are also bypassing normal banking channels, and they are into this business of mobile banking. Similarly, what is the Aadhaar cards which are making? This will, for mobile banking, this any payments in Narega and other thing, that can be helpful when mobile banking will be coming. The people who have got mobile phone but do not have bank accounts can take advantage of the mobile banking. And telecom is going to constitute a critical building block of infrastructure. So again we have come to the what are the factors as we discussed earlier which are affecting internet, literacy, education, geographical location. For the women, if the people are there in the urban area, they have got more access. Women in the rural area, they got less access to the internet. Mobility and social class. Again, a caste is there, which is internet access is critical to women to earn more money or search and apply for jobs. Because there are two kind of benefits women will be having. One is the tangible benefits, another will be intangible benefits. Tangible benefits will be in terms of employment opportunities, and intangible benefits will be their own confidence. If they are having access to internet, their confidence will be more, and as a result it will lead to their empowerment. At present there are around 700 million people, because we are all one out of 1.25 billion people. 700 million people live in villages in India. And more than 90% women, they are working in informal sectors. They are not into the formal sectors. Like they are into the business of handicrafts, making, sewing, rolling cigarettes, weaving of baskets, fabrics, or in the organized sector, in the vendors, they are vendors in the cities, like selling vegetables and all. So how we can in a micro and a household level, how we can make internet help to the women? First thing is, internet can help them in increasing the educational opportunities, income generation, increase of their self-esteem and confidence, that is the intangible benefit. Autonomy can be there, they have not to depend on anybody if they are earning little bit. Capacity to alter the structures that govern one situation. That is again with, if you become independent earning, you can do that. Empowerment will be there, and livelihood a direct outcome of mobile and internet. So social networking to allow women to enlarge their community. They have got so many issues like health issues are there. If they are If they are empowered, if they are knowledgeable, they can take care about their health issues. So how women as a change agent for financial inclusion, the use of mobile in reaching out rural residents with financial services has now cut off fast, and the women can be a very change agent. There are microfinancing companies which are coming in the rural areas, and women self-help groups are there. They are joining together and they are really making a difference. Banks, MFI, mobile phone companies need to come together to work out some solution for microfinancing for them so that they can increase the employment opportunity. HSCB Bank is working with the in Maharashtra Satara Institution for Mahila Sahakari Bank in microfinance. So similarly, so many initiatives are already there and it needs to be enhanced. So here come we as a BSNL, how we are as a stakeholder, how we are becoming, how we are helping in development of internet. So PSU like BSNL and MTNL has played a preeminent role in provision of telecom services in the country, especially in rural, remote and backward and hilly areas. So there where no private operator is going, we have been going there. We have been in, border areas to the Ladakh areas, everywhere we have been providing. Initially it was STD PCOs, now I think internet kiosks we are doing. As per telecom policy of 2012, PSU like BSNL, MTNL shall continue to provide internet access to the rural areas. This is the mandate the government has taken, that despite private operators there in every field, BSNL and MTNL has to be utilized for providing internet facilities to the rural and remote areas. Through USO, we have got some scheme as Rural Public Service Terminal (RPSTs) to self-help groups. Provision of wireline broadband connectivity in rural and remote areas. With USO fund support, BSNL has set up around 3,38,617 broadband connections. BSNL has set up around 6,420 internet-enabled kiosks in the rural and remote areas. So every village, we have to have a kiosk as a internet service kiosk has to be there. And a person can access that kiosk for 5 rupees per 1 hour. If a rural area person wants to browse through internet, he can go to the telephone exchange. There one computer will be there. He has to enter into his details and can access it for rupees 5 per hour. And for that we are getting a subsidy from the USO fund. RPSC is a dual mode broadband enabled multi-application terminal with CDMA, GSM connectivity to the self-help group. BSNL shall ensure that RPSC model provided to the SHG meets the necessary standards for secure financial transactions. So there the people can do internet banking also, they can come, money transfer also can be provided. RPST shall be equipped with a card reader for credit debit applications and an ISO compliant smart card reader. RPST shall be supported by thermal printer and UPS with 24 hours power backup. So these schemes we are already in the process of setting up of RPST in the rural areas. Banking services such as cash withdrawal, remittance, whereby the RPST franchisee shall act as a banking correspondent. Facilitation of government disbursement like NREGA, pension, PDS, that will be through RPST. Then villagers will be needing a railway reservation, bus ticketing, mobile top-ups, utility bill payments like electricity and all to the state government utilities to be paid. It will generate an additional revenue and employment for the self-help groups. Then again, PCO services is already there, so that will continue to be there. And then there can be life, general insurance, micro insurance services for crop, cattle, health and home insurance. So those services will also be eventually done by RPST. So now provision of wireline broadband connectivity in rural and remote areas. For our rural and remote areas, we have got a very extensive. BSNL is having 30,000 total exchanges, and out of that around 20,000 exchanges are in rural areas. So almost all district block headquarters we are having a presence, and we are having a wireline services over there. So in which there is now mandate that in every telephone exchange we should provide a preferential basis connection to a women's self-help group, and for any exchange wherever we provide 31 telephone connections will be that is broadband connections will be subsidized. So out of let us say 128 line telephone exchange, 31 connections will be given to the will be subsidized. It will be given to the individual government institutions, and it will be subsidized. So we will be paid subsidy for the modem and as well as the computer device. So these are the tariff plan for USO fund broadband connections, because we are for rupees 99 we can give a 512 kbps connection in a rural area. So this is very economical. Their rate per MB is around 0.40 paisa per MB, and up to 400 MB the rate will be 99 rupees, and up to 1 GB the rate will be rupees 150. So now I think this particular thing will be covered in the subsequent sessions. Government of India has come up with a BBNL, that is Bharat Broadband Nigam Limited. So this is particular thing is there through a core team of Dr. Sam Petroda, Nandan Nilekani, they were the member, beside BSNL, RailTel and PGCL and CDOT. They are all the stakeholders in that, and they are the representative and who came up with the idea of NOFN project, National Optical Fiber Network. For that a special purpose vehicle, SPV, has been made, and that is new SPV is called as BBNL, Bharat Broadband Nigam Limited. So under this project, we will be extending optical fiber from block headquarter to all 250,000 gram panchayats, utilizing existing fibers of 3 PSUs, that is BSNL, RailTel, PGCL. BSNL is having already around 5.5 lakh kilometer of optical fiber in the country. Similarly, RailTel and PGCL, they do have less, but they do also have. So there, whosoever blockhead up to block headquarter, their mobile this optical fiber will be available. That will be further extended to gram panchayats, and there are around 250,000 gram panchayats. Their optical fiber will be laid. Dark fiber network thus created would be an appropriate technologies for creating appropriate bandwidth at the GP level. So at gram panchayat level, it is proposed to have 100 Mbps bandwidth availability. So if that becomes available, so that particular bandwidth will be given to the private operators. They can further extend it to remote areas, to the villagers. And that particular thing, further extension can be through any of the technologies they would like to have, through microwave, through radio, through mobile, or any of the technology they feel economical, they can extend to the remote areas. So main highlight will be that around 2.5 lakh gram panchayats are there, village headquarters, 100 Mbps bandwidth at gram panchayat level with backhaul to the block and district headquarter will be there. Coverage to the villages will be provided by the service provider as per the market forces. There will be competition for that. That is a last mile access. So this will be a 24/365 reliable, always available IP related network to ensure continuous availability of service in the rural and remote areas. Technology chosen is a GPON technology, as it is simple and it is involving less capex as well as operating expenditure. So GPON is a ITU-T standard and can serve distances up to 20 kilometers. And now we have come up with a tender of 4.5 lakh kilometer of optical fiber cable. This is already there, the tender. Around 5 lakh kilometer optical fiber is to be laid. And this is a mega project, and its total outlay will be around $4 billion. That is around 20,000 crore rupees. So this is the kind of investment the government is going to make for the remote and rural areas. So basic infrastructure will be laid, and after that applications can be built up over there. A lot of stakeholders will be there which will be coming up with the new schemes to popularize internet. Government services to the Aam Aadmi related to e-governance, e-education, e-health, all applications can be built up. One basic infrastructure is available. So as a BSNL, we are into all these, areas. We are into IN services, internet broadband, GSM mobile, 3G, VAS, enterprise data services, lease circuits, MPLS, VPN space. We are into data center services. We have got data centers at Chennai, Faridabad, Chandigarh, all these places. So we are helping for cloud computing also. So that kind of facilities BSNL has. National long distance and international long distance. So this is a kind of thing BSNL is into every aspect of telecommunication. So this is just to get an idea that total BSNL has around 10.13 million million broadband connections. And this is the progression of BSNL broadband growth, that we started customer base in 2008 as 2.32 million, and this is around 9.927. BSNL market share is around 65%. So this is the total broadband connections available in the country. Various operators have got like that. BSNL has 9.989, Bharti has 1.40, MTNL has 1.08, and other people like SIFI and all, they have got 2.63. So broadband coverage, you see, in the country we have got total district headquarters are 632 in the country, and BSNL coverage is around 99.37% as far as broadband coverage in the district headquarters is concerned. So there are 4 district headquarters, that is Sapa, Karalang, Anini and Hawaii in this Arunachal Pradesh. Okay. So this is total 6 lakh villages are there, and we have covered up to 1.69 lakh. So really coverage in the villages is less. And these are the various things again. So total villages, up to now, out of 6 lakh, 5.93 lakh villages are covered with some telecommunication facilities. VPTs are there, CDMA, GSM is there. And this is just for the statistics. Again, we are coming up with the Ministry of HRD. They have given us a project of covering broadband in schools. This project will be connecting government and government-aided schools throughout the country with high-speed network. That already we are doing it. Out of 18,000 schools, we have laid around 20%. Similarly, universities are there. Out of 400 universities under NMEICT project, National Mission on Education through ICT, 385 universities we have already covered. Thank you very much. So if anything or any information you would like to have or ask from me, I am available.
Shall we have the next speaker also before we take any questions? I think that, I'd invite Nandini from IT for Change, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm coming at the end of a long day, so I shall try to keep my talk as focused and short as possible, and then we can have some time for discussion as well. So specifically, the issue I will be focusing on is about how we can make internet access meaningful for women in the Indian context. Now, broadly, internet access to India and the general context, Mr. Veer Kamal Chopra has already covered in his presentation. So to sum that up quickly, we are in a context where the household rate of internet penetration is very low, with only 10.2% of 1.1 billion people accessing the internet. And though the rate of mobile internet is expected to overtake the growth rate of the uh, fixed broadband, it is still not like a very high rate of penetration, because in 2012, the study by Intel on women and the web, it found out that about 10% of mobile subscribers in India actually have internet access, in the sense that they are using it quite regularly. And less than 4% of India's rural population is online, and this marks a huge urban-rural divide in a context where the majority of the population is situated in the villages. Now, about women and their internet access and usage. As you may already know, gender disaggregated statistics for internet usage are very difficult to come by, and there are only very few countries that are maintaining systematic data sets that are collated by the ITI. So the Intel Women and the Web report, which was released in 2012, that kind of like came out at a point when there was a lot of discussion about how to fill this data gap, and which is why I'm using this data set rather than, let's say, a ITU or a government data set, because they are very hard to come by. So, and in fact, we don't have that data set at the moment. So in India, 8.4% of women were accessing the internet in 2012, according to the study. And it also found out that a woman in India is about 27% less likely than a man to use the internet. So there is certainly a great gender gap in terms of women and men's access to the net. And also, very interestingly, out of the women who were using the internet, this study, the statistics were arrived at by taking a sample survey and then doing regression analysis and making the data set fit for like a larger population. 43% of the women in India who are using the internet, they perceive the internet as being most essential to their lives, especially in terms of like expanding their social networks, in terms of like offering job and entrepreneurial opportunities and so on. But the study also says that out of the 40% of women who had never utilized the internet, only about 10% talked about household level patriarchal controls, such as my husband or father would not allow it, as a reason for not accessing the internet. About 40% of women said, this is not relevant to my life, I do not need the internet. Now this makes us actually think about one aspect of access. Often access is reduced to a question of like bridging the gender digital divide. Now, is it enough to say that, you give someone a telephone in her hand, or a mobile or an internet enabled computer or an internet enabled phone? What is it that makes someone want to use the internet, or what makes the internet experience meaningful for someone? And that is a very important question, I think, when it comes to thinking about women and the internet anywhere and in India as well. So one major area of concern would be entrenched patriarchies, in the sense that there are immense socio-cultural barriers to be overcome when we talk about women's access to any new technology, and in terms of like the internet and mobile usage as well. And I'm not going to go into the details of that, because stories about Khap panchayats banning the use of women's use of mobiles and restricting especially the use of mobiles and internet by unmarried girls, because it is seen as encouraging lawless behavior or flouting of accepted norms. That is very well known. That is one area that has often been focused upon. Now, coming to the other area, in a context where, there are very low rates of female literacy, and we have a huge non-English speaking population, how do you make internet contextually relevant? Basically, what is it that the internet offers in terms of empowering possibilities? It is the ability to make networks that bridge spatial and time barriers, right? And an access to a wide range of translocal information networks. Now, I think it involves like some thinking out of the box, which initiatives such as CGNet Swara in Chhattisgarh have done, where actually CGNet Swara, I mean, do you know about it, or should I? I mean, I think I will just talk about it in brief, and you can ask me questions later if you wish. Where CGNet Swara is this interactive voice recording system that uses a open source software, and there is a telephony server also that can be set up on something as simple as a laptop. And it allows people from Chhattisgarh to call in and record their own news reports in a context where there is a high level of media censorship. And once people record their news reports, this is moderated and there is like a certain editing content, and it is also put up on an online web platform which journalists and other people, activists who are interested in covering Chhattisgarh and being keyed into issues of Chhattisgarh can access. So basically it enables the voices of certain communities who would never come into the mainstream to reach like mainstream media, and that is because it is like beyond the textual, like community video, community radio, because digital platforms have enabled like tremendous shrinkage of costs in developing radio programs, or editing has become much more simple now compared to earlier. So these possibilities also, and thinking about them is also equally important as thinking about the internet for women's empowerment, I feel. And most importantly, in a context where the rate of household penetration is very low, it becomes important to think about what is this imaginary of public access we have, because public access points to the net become very crucial. And it is well known that cyber cafes are like extremely patriarchal, and it is extremely difficult. It is very gendered as a space, and it is extremely difficult for women to access cyber cafes and feel comfortable in these spaces, and there are plenty of studies on that. And at this point, yes, state schemes do have some imaginary of like setting up public access points, but they are more in the nature of creating information and service delivery points, such as the government's flagship Common Service Center scheme. But as a recent study by Washington University on the global impact of ICTs has pointed out, sometimes it's not enough to think of public access points as merely an intermediate step that needs to be created in this transition to everybody privately accessing the internet. Because very often, like for instance in Kerala state, which has a very well developed structure of common service centers, which are the Akshaya centers in Kerala, the vision document for Kerala is very clear that the ultimate aim is to have like every citizen digitally transact with the government, or digitally look for information on his private devices, on mobile or computer and internet. But sometimes it's also important to think of like a point which would facilitate the interlinking of like social information networks with online ones. In the sense, how are we going to look at possibilities which would strengthen our Gram Panchayat libraries, for instance? For instance, in Karnataka state, it is one state where every Gram Panchayat has a Panchayat library. Now, considering that, if we are going to have this optical fiber network where all Gram Panchayats would be getting a broadband internet, why not think of points where the library would also serve as a community information and knowledge center? Now, how do we shift the imaginary of public access to something like that? And that becomes important in terms of like having intermediaries who understand the gendered nature of such public spaces and are able to help women mediate the internet in ways that are contextually relevant and which will help them get the information and get access to what they want on the net in terms of what is relevant for their everyday lives. The other aspect I think that needs some thought is about how do we think about the women's rights agenda and the new spaces and networks opened up by the internet. And here the the possibilities for ICTs in terms of women's empowerment is like a much talked about area in mainstream ICTD discourse and mainstream ICTD work. And very often the focus has been on economic empowerment because of the new opportunities that ICT enabled enterprises and ICT enterprises create as they enable home-based work for women and micro work. Now there are some concerns here about sometimes ICTs will not help in breaking those barriers which make women more marginalized than men when it comes to business opportunities or when it comes to setting up their enterprises. In terms of if women do not have like an existing strong social network, the ICT by itself cannot give a woman access to that, which a man would have, and he would facilitate and improve upon when he has like a mobile phone or an internet connection. So it is like very simplistic to draw a very techno-deterministic picture of how access to ICTs and the internet just open up all these glorious opportunities for empowerment. And that being said, people have also spoken about how micro work or home-based enterprises their gendered effects are not fully understood because they often increase women's double work burden in terms of the woman also has to earn for the household and also has to perform her role as a family caretaker, and that doesn't really change. She may still not have control over her earnings. So studies of ICT-enabled enterprises in Africa and Kenya have shown this. And also a recent UNCTAD study on ICTs and micro enterprises and poverty alleviation actually talk about how the micro enterprises that are created by women are actually at the bottom of the value chain, involved in core production activities. And until you have public goods provision and a safety net that encourages those enterprises, it is not possible for women to kind of tap into all these new networks that access to the internet enables and like realize economic empowering possibilities, because very often these new networks are used by the big businesses and intermediaries to consolidate their existing networks of intermediation, which anyway marginalize women. And we had also done a recent study of the Kudumbashree and Akshaya projects of Kerala state. Kudumbashree is a micro-enterprise project where the state supports self-help groups in setting up their businesses, including ICT-enabled businesses. And Akshaya program, as I was mentioning, is the Common Service Center program of the government of Kerala, which is run under a franchisee model where village-level entrepreneurs are selected on the basis of like certain criteria, including like a certain weightage for like women applicants. And they run these information and service delivery kiosks in the Gram Panchayats, and they also can supply businesses, e-learning and other such services apart from governance services through these kiosks. Now we found that though there were many women entrepreneurs, very often they were not like in charge of the businesses. Very often, sometimes they would have taken over the business because the chances of like, being selected was higher if the applicant was a woman, or sometimes the husband would have suddenly got another government job and he could be no longer running the center and he would have transferred it to the name of the wife, though he was in control of all the operations. And yes, in terms of those centers that were actually controlled in the full sense by women, that in both Kudumbashree projects about like, setting up ICT businesses and in the Akshaya program, women actually felt that they were completely dependent on the job works that were given by the state, and they did not have like the hand-holding and guidance or support needed to develop their business in a way that would help them like really grow as entrepreneurs. And sometimes it was also interesting to see how this label of being an entrepreneur also made women like, not recognize their position of being marginalized in the larger information economy. So sometimes being labeled an entrepreneur just results in women being blind to their position of marginality in the larger information economy, and they cannot even organize as labor and demand their rights. So this was something that our study found. But it is not to say that, this is like totally bleak, because there are indeed experiments such as, the experiment of Seva in Gujarat, which has used ICTs very creatively to already strengthen its cooperatives and women's cooperatives that are involved in handicrafts and micro enterprise, and it has like really worked on consolidating and strengthening those networks. And another thing, when we talk about empowerment, it is like very easy to reduce the possibilities of ICTs to just micro enterprise. I think it is also equally important to look at how the new online public sphere, the spaces opened up by the internet, open up new spaces for subverting mainstream gender norms for women. There are a lot of studies, such as the study by the Association of Progressive Communication, about how new spaces give women, including women of alternative sexual identities, a safe space to express themselves and a safe space to build solidarities, which probably would not have been possible in an earlier world. At the same time, the rising use of online spaces and has also led to a number of threats, such as like growing online violence against women, and that also like needs like some thought, because it is not to say that in making online spaces safe, the sole burden right now like rests on the user. Right now, if somebody new or somebody who's unfamiliar with ICTs and the internet is starting to use the net and starting to use these spaces, how do you ensure that they are able to protect themselves when they navigate these spaces? And another area that has often drawn attention is about how ICTs do offer possibilities for women's political organizing and the feminist movement to build its solidarity. And in India, one example we frequently encounter and talk about is the Pink Chaddi campaign, where a group of feminists were using the internet to actively protest against the attack of the Shri Ram Sena, a right-wing extremist group in Mangalore, on some women who went to a pub and to talk about those issues. But what is probably not as talked about is about how when this group on its Facebook page, it started facing harassment, and there were like trolls on the page, and there were like growing racist slurs and attacks. When the group administrator complained to Facebook, there was no action taken, and also when repeatedly she tried to like engage with Facebook, finally the group administrator's account was disabled. And I'm using this incident, to gain an entry point to another debate, where the threat of state surveillance and censorship by states is very often talked about in the global spaces where internet public policies are debated, such as the Internet Governance Forum. But what is not often spoken about is about arbitrary censorship and content regulation by corporates, and this gradual slide from self-regulation by corporates into areas where they take on these roles of like devolved governance and devolved regulation, which like many advocates of internet rights have pointed to. Because very often the lack of a regulated internet, which is the space we inhabit, it gives us an illusion of freedom, and the state becomes a bogeyman where state regulation or public policy regulation would be seen as threatening the freedom of these spaces. But what is not being seen here is that in this unregulated space, existing threats to freedoms of communication and association do exist in terms of arbitrary censorship and control by corporates who take decisions based on protecting their business and their political interests. And there are numerous examples of this. And I would really recommend that, this YouTube link I have enclosed here, it's a talk by someone from the European Digital Rights Initiative, and the talk is called Nippel's Rule of Law and talking about intermediary liability. And it's it's a 28-minute talk, and I can't play excerpts from it because he makes an entire core argument in the course of the talk. But that is very interesting in terms of showing how the lack of a clear, cohesive public policy framework on talking about in talking about issues of the global internet has led to a position where there is arbitrary and inchoate and confused responses by the variety of stakeholders involved in it, such as like the variety of corporates, European Union and the US, resulting in arbitrary censorship and arbitrary controls on user freedoms. And, and the other, coming to this, it is like thus evident that women's rights advocates and anyone interested in furthering the feminist agenda would have to work in these spaces of internet governance such as the IGF and really engage with how internet public policy issues and their implications on gender are. But sadly, that's not the case because as studies of the spaces of internet governance such as IGF have shown, though there is a woman's presence and there are even like separate spaces dedicated for women's participation such as the Gender Dynamic Coalition in the IGF, the women's agenda is not getting mainstreamed into the sessions, and this has been pointed out by the Association for Progressive Communications, who has been actively involved in the space for a long time, in a 2011 gender report card that they did of all the sessions in the IGF and the main public policy debates. And on the same lines, last year we had also done a discourse analysis of how the women's rights agenda has been interpreted in all the sessions of the Internet Governance Forum. And we found interestingly that the presence is very marginal. Women speakers are very few. These were facts that we knew. More importantly, there is like a complete invisibility of socio-economic rights when it comes to talking about women's rights and the internet, because the debate is totally focused on freedom of expression, censorship concerns, and that also has grave implications for those of us working in advocating the women's rights agenda from the global south, because how do you deal with issues such as public access and ensuring women's rights to public access when those debates are not being paid attention to? And I would just like to conclude by this quote from Christian Fuchs, who's like a famous critical theorist and who's written a lot on thinking through the relationship between the internet and society. Now, we can just see that the internet has opened up so many possibilities in an objective sense to work towards a cooperative society. But this has never seemed so unrealistic and insurmountable in a subjective sense as it is seeming today. And I think as women's rights advocates or as feminists working on advancing this agenda, there's a lot of truth here, and this is a challenge that we have to deal with like every day when we work towards furthering this. Thank you.
Perceptions of public spaces, they have a little more decentralized. Access, women's access to internet centers in say a city like Kolkata to say Hyderabad or Chennai. So would you think there would be a difference, and why would that difference be there? Have you ever thought of it? It's a very simple thing. In Calcutta, the internet cafe is organized where all the screens face inward to the room. So any person entering the center would be able to see what's happening on every single screen. Whereas if you go to Hyderabad or Chennai, you will have little boxes. And if you go, and in the Calcutta instance, you will have at least 30% women in the centers. In these places, very few women go. It's just the design of the internet public access thing.
Thank you both. I was wondering, in terms of the data that you have, and you cited, Nandini, you cited a lot of the the research by and the reports that have kind of focused on gender and other forms of access. I'm wondering if, do you all do your own research as well at IT for Change on this issue? And if you could talk about your own findings a little bit more and how they might have corroborated or differed with the sources that you do find. And similarly, in the VSNL case, do you have a research wing where you look at who your users are and the kind of access that they have? And do you have, in terms of quality of service, do you have, rates of, what kind of service you are able to provide rural areas beyond just having the infrastructure there? What are some of the access issues that communities you work in face very specifically? Do you keep databases, and do you have a research team that goes out and does, baseline surveys, not only on the technical part, but also on the social part as to what that society is like and what your users are like?
Actually, in BSNL, you have rightly pointed out that we should have in the organization a setup like that, where we can go, what are the expectations of the people, how much the access they are having, whether they are able to access or not. Unfortunately, we are so much tied up with day-to-day kind of operations in that we miss this very important aspect of it. So in BSNL, is a very typical in our country that if you see the setup on the roads or setup on the access which is going through municipal roads and all, there you will find that there is hardly any regulation or a rule governing those access on the roads. As a result, what happens as a telecom engineer, most of the time we have been doing crisis management only. If one place is working okay, 10 places, they are cut in the, access or optical fiber cable, and we are running around day and night in order to restore what is available. So this particular thing should be there, that wherein we can, in order to give a better quality of service or better access to be given to the people, and we should be able to see how we can do better what we are doing now. Unfortunately, being a governmental organization, this thing is missing. Thank you.
Okay, at IT for Change, another key area that we work in is in doing a field project in Mysore, which actually tries to look at on the field when we try to experiment with and implement some of these ideas, what are the challenges and how we can navigate them so that we can learn in a very bottom up and in a way that encourages practice. So I would like to respond to your question coming from those experiences, because right now we have a project which looks at how for women in 2 blocks of Mysore, HD Kote and Hunsur, which are quite marginalized in terms of like having a high percentage of tribal populations and all that. How you can look at enabling meaningful access to ICTs in a way that will help them claim their rights and help them engage with local governance institutions better, and also bring in their perspectives and voices into the local public sphere, as generally women's agendas and women's perspectives get marginalized. So under this we run three basic techno-social strategies, which is like a community radio called Kelusaki, which gets broadcast over the FM of the Karnataka State Open University. So everybody across 4 or 5 blocks can tune into that at like, once a week. And then we have this community video initiative where we make films that bring in women's concerns in the local dialect and pictured on local women, and sometimes made by local women themselves, with some support from us to bring in their perspectives. And we also have a community information centers model where we have block and village information centers, which are like managed by a committee of Sangha women, Mahila Samakya Sangha women in these project villages, and where the information intermediary is a literate adolescent girl from the village, and she helps in collecting information from various government departments and helping the communities process entitlements, access entitlements, and so on. And recently what we wanted to do here was to set up like a SMS-based network for women. In the sense of like, I shouldn't call it a SMS-based network because originally it was an idea that out of the women who have mobiles, many of them can read and write Kannada at least to a minimal extent. And then we found out that, finding phones which supported the Unicode format and which would allow a Kannada SMS network was a problem. So we started exploring IVRS. And we wanted to have an IVRS system which would connect all Sangha women and which would be something like a platform where they can tune in and say their concerns and listen to other Sangha women's experiences of participating in various Mahila Samakya activities, being in the public sphere, similar challenges while dealing with local governance institutions and so on. And one thing that got like severely tested was about there is like this general assumption when you look at mobile penetration about how like at least in the south about how everyone has mobiles now and all the women have mobiles and can access mobiles and mobile ownership is quite high. But then when we started work, it actually made us like rethink that thing, that assumption we had started with. Because very often, though the woman has a mobile and she is carrying it to all the meetings, it becomes a way by which the husband's controlling her movement exactly. And he can't, he kind of like checks her call logs and everything. And this is true for the women who are like on the surface of it seem most empowered and seem like most to have broken those household barriers. So that way there are like surface level assumptions that our work has made us rethink about, does a woman having a mobile or that mobile is her private mobile and that mobile is not something she shares with the household members, does that really change her experiences of like dealing with patriarchal barriers, does that reinforce them? Certain assumptions like that, it made us rethink. And also in terms of looking at the whole hype about the mobile internet and how the mobile internet is the solution and is the road towards the future. It may be true that mobile internet like will overtake fixed broadband, and mobile internet is what will happen in those areas which have very poor levels of infrastructure. But the qualitative experience of using a mobile internet in terms of like it's less generative, it's less open, in terms of user experiences and how a mobile cannot be a substitute for internet access to broadband. Those are some of the issues of our research especially focuses on, and those are some assumptions that we constantly have to rethink and question.
Just to add one small thing, I think, in the context of access, when you were talking about, you gave a very interesting statistic about how 40% of the women who don't have internet access on their mobiles don't have it because they feel that it is not relevant to their context. Where I think this is there is a need to look deeper into something like this, because the context by the statement is also very well defined, and by saying that it is not relevant to our context, it is actually saying that because my duties are supposed to be this, and for that internet access on my mobile will not help me at all. So I think that is also a statistic that needs to be looked into deeper, and thinking about what are these contexts and why are these making it so that people actually feel that liberty and freedom are something that they do not require, or maybe internet is something that they don't require. I think that is also something that this statistic can be broken down into, would come closer to that.
A lot of women have access to the internet already, but what they do is they don't seem to use it. So how can we convince them to actually start using internet? So like for example, my mom, she has access to internet on her phone, and she knows mobile banking could be done and she could recharge her phone through the phone itself. But then again, she has to depend on us. So how can I go about and tell her that, you could do it yourself? How can we actually convince women to do that?
Very interesting.
I got a very funny solution if you... No. Have your mom a Facebook account, then she will become more interested.
She has one.
I think that's a problem for the children.
songs is getting cheaper, and you do see that to some extent these kind of things are
like Kukri sites are there, she will become interested in making that kind of thing, video games. So whatever is interest you in the age bracket, so that thing will bring a kind of attraction to that.
So I think Nandini, if you want to answer that question, you should, and then we should wind up and we can continue these discussions on the dinner table, because the speakers are captive audience and they're here, and you can pounce upon them on the dinner table and say you're not getting out of here till you answer my question. So we all need a break, and do you want to have anything to say?
I'll just take a moment. So I think from what he has also pointed out right now, this, I think, if you reframe the question in a certain way, you would find an answer. More than looking at it as in how can I make someone use the internet, if you start thinking about what would they gain or why should they use the internet, and look at and make that the starting point of like addressing the issue, I think, that's it, we have it. Because if the internet is not like seen as relevant, like he was also pointing out, we need closer attention to the questions of context. That is because we are not looking at it in a structural sense of like, it's not just a technology, right? It's opening up new connections and it is remaking the social world we inhabit. If that is the perspective from which we approach the question of internet access or use or meaningful use, then I think you have a solution, even like personally. That's all. Thank you.
I tell you one very interesting incident. 1 month back, Mr. Farooq Abdullah, I think at that time Dr. Mamita was also there. She received the prize and all these member of parliaments, they have been provided laptops, smartphones, as well as small iPads. Everybody is having. And Farooq Abdullah candidly said, whenever I press some button, I have to ask my son or some helper 25 times why I have put this, what is happening, it was not happening last time, what is happening, it is not happening now. Tell me to do that. I think it is related with the age also. The moment if you are, let us say, 60s or 70s, like Farooq Abdullah is I think more than 70 years old. So if at that stage, if you hand him over an iPad, he will take a lot of time to know what these buttons mean. In the meantime, users of the button will also change in the next model.
No, but I don't know. I mean, I think just coming back to the issue of research, which I think I want to keep emphasizing more and more. And even, I mean, I like the example you gave, Nandini, but it's still, I'm still saying what's your sample size, for making those claims. So I kind of want to emphasize the rigor of research is very important. So we assume that there is an age divide and that that internet has to somehow be very youth oriented. And I agree with you in how you phrased it, Nandini, that it has to have a certain amount of use for the person who's using it, right? And I think with that, the beauty is supposed to be that any age can learn it. You might have text on it, so you don't have to be literate in that sense. If you don't have too much text, and you have to be very basically literate, right? You don't have to have a PhD to use the internet, and especially with visuals and graphics and all those kinds of possibilities which are different from reading the print medium. So I think I agree that it's what is it that would motivate your mom or other women to use it. My mom, who's almost 70, I know is using it so she can Skype with her grandson. So I mean, I mean, so and see him so that is a big motivator, and she's pretty good at it now.
So, and one strange suggestion from my side, what I've seen with my parents is, one, long distance communication is a primary reason for them, and B, I shifted them to using Linux around 2 years ago, and since then they are much less frustrated at the computer, because earlier the main phone calls I would receive from my parents would be an antivirus box popping up, and asking, and they'll call me up to say, should I say yes or no? And the firewall, something will pop up, and what should I answer? They would call me up. Right? And with Linux, I don't have to worry about any of that. They don't have to worry about any of that. Okay, and so they face less frustrating messages. Okay, and all the programs they use are just the same as when they were on Windows. So that's a help for me.
So I think on these funny notes, we should wind up the day. It's been tiring, and thanks everybody for your attention and being patient. And what we're going to do is